Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I want to talk about my December wrap up. So all the books that I read in December. And December was a pretty good reading month. The first half of the month was super busy. I think I did very little reading in the first half. So I want to share the things that I read with you today. So the first thing I read, I actually listened to an audiobook because I'd seen from some people online that it was a really good audiobook. And that's Sadie by Courtney Summers. And this ended up being in my best of 2018. It is, I do recommend the audiobook because the narrators do such a wonderful, beautiful job with a beautiful, beautiful story. It is an extremely dark story. You are taking a teenager who has suffered a significant amount of trauma in her life, and we're following her for a very short period of time as she's trying to basically get revenge. So it's a very, very dark story and about the horrible things that happen to young girls all the time. And there's significant trigger warnings here for sexual abuse and pedophilia. I think this is a book that is completely worthwhile, and I loved this story. Incredibly heartbreaking, but I cared so much about Sadie, and I wanted her to be okay, and I wanted to children shouldn't have to go through what this girl goes through, and they do every day, and there's more we can do in our communities and in the people around us to try to help. Anyway, that was really heartbreaking, but it was a really beautiful story. The next book I read, I needed something a little bit lighter, so of course I went to a mystery. But there's comfort to me in reading mystery stories, and this is the first in the what is it? It's the Kate Bruckholder series by Linda Castillo. It's Sworn to Silence. I originally had started reading this series with book, I think it was 9 or 10 in the series, and I was like, oh crap, I didn't know this was a series. Let me go back to the very beginning. And so I did in December. Sworn to Silence is a really good kind of first book. Actually, I think you could probably pick up this series anywhere in the series. So it's set in a fictional town of Painters Mill, Ohio, in an Amish community, and you're following the chief of police in this area, who is a former member of the Amish community, and how she navigates the world, kind of going between the Amish community she left behind and the rest of the community in this town, and solving crimes. So this first one was a serial killer crime story, and it was interesting. It was interesting enough for me that I cared a lot about what was happening. What was also interesting to me was that kind of looking back at some of these characters, have kind of knowing where they're going to end up in book 9 or 10, and seeing them for the first time being introduced here. I think Linda Castillo does a really good job of setting up the everyone's broken a narrative in this book. Our main character is she's allowed to be flawed, she's allowed to be strong, kick-ass, but facing problems, has demons in her past, and is just also trying to do the right thing. And the mystery gets solved in the end, which is one of the reasons why I love reading some of these books. And I don't know, it was a really good book. It is a series I'm going to continue reading, and so I'm looking forward to continuing this series in 2019. The next book that I read was also in my favorites of 2018, and it was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. So I listened to this one in audio, and I do recommend the audiobook. It is the story of a young 20-something girl in New York who, at 3 a.m., walks out of her job and sees this giant statue in front of Chipotle. This giant, warlike statue, and she thinks, cool installation art. Let me go on my way. But then she stops and she's like, wait, we do this a lot in New York. We just walk right by really great things. Let me stop and really look at this. And she calls her friend who comes on over. They create a video around this giant statue in New York. And the next day, they realize that there's one of these giant statues in most of the world's capitals. And they're not like in obvious places. They're not like in Times Square, but still they're in like the world's biggest cities, these giant statues. And it becomes clear really quickly that they are made out of material that cannot be found on Earth. I'll put it that way. So there is an element of like sci-fi in this book, but it's also a book about social media. This video that our main character and her friend put out goes viral. And it turns out that this video basically defines the way that humanity looks at these statues right off the bat. And so her role becomes really important, and she becomes really obsessed with kind of remaining the face of humanity facing or figuring out what to do with these statues and the way she goes about doing that, right? So it's a lot of commentary about friendship, about fame, and about social media. And it seemed to me like one of those books that was extremely timely, and also timeless, in that I think it will withstand the test of time. But it's also a very timely book. Like, I read it and it just felt so 2018, and it spoke to me at like various different levels. Right, as somebody who is on social media but is not like a major player, like I don't have a giant following, I don't have 1 million followers, nothing like that, but a lot of us are on social media and we see some of these things occurring from the periphery. And so it's interesting to kind of basically see it from the inside, right? Follow this character as she is dealing with these things. So absolutely love it. I really enjoyed Hank Green's writing. I think I saw somewhere that he's writing a sequel to this. So it'll be an automatic buy for me. This was just a really, really great book. One that I've been recommending on this channel the last couple of videos, but one that I've also been recommending in real life to like family and friends, because I think a lot of people would really like this book. All right, the next book I read, I also have a full video on that because I did a reading vlog on it. So if you're interested, go ahead and take a look. So I'll just briefly mention a few things here that I read. Uprooted. I feel like, okay, it's a decent enough book. It's not out of this world for me. I didn't give it 4.5 or 5 stars, which would be a book that I would then be recommending to everybody. But I think it definitely has its audience. I can see why people love it. You're following the story of this young girl who every decade, the dragon, this like local wizard, picks out a girl from local villages that comes and lives with him for a decade. At the end of the decade, the girl can leave. She goes, and usually she goes back to her village for a couple of weeks and then ends up going to the city. And so the time has come for him to pick another girl, and everyone thinks he's going to pick the most beautiful, most talented girl in the village, and instead he picks our main character. And niche magical world then unfolds. I try to not give much away here, but I really enjoy some of the magical elements in here. It is a fast-paced, action-filled book. I felt like I didn't have a lot of time to breathe in this book. There were a few moments, and there were very precious moments in which I could like take a step back. But the magic in here, whoa, like, I liked it. I liked it a lot. And then after reading that, I just needed lightness. I need lightness, and when I need lightness, I go to mysteries or romance novels. So I'm a mood reader, so depending on what mood I'm in, I will go to kind of tried and true genres or tried and true series. And the series that I've been working on in 2018 and I will continue working on is the In-Depth series by J.D. Robb or Nora Roberts. And I read number 11, which is Judgment in Death. And you're following Detective Eve Dallas, and you have in each book a kind of crime murder of the week. And this book dealt with the murder of cops. The murder of cops and this kind of its connection to a really powerful man who is at odds with Rourke, Eve Dallas's husband. And I do have to admit, Rourke got a little annoying. I really love the relationship between Eve and Rourke, and I think it like fuels the series in large part, because they have just a really, like, the way Roberts handles this series is like she treats our main couple like a real couple. Like, it's not a will they won't they get together in the, right off the bat in the series. They're married, and so throughout the rest of the series it seems like we're dealing with them working on their marriage, having a like very positive sex life, and they both have issues that they need to work on, and it's like lovely to see that evolve, right? In this book, it worked a little annoying, and I think I get annoyed with this relationship with issues of security. She's a cop and he's a really powerful man. They're both in danger a large chunk of the series. And I'm in book 11, or this was book 11, and I was like, we need to get it together, guys. Like, you're both in danger, and we need to figure out a compromise to make this work. Because otherwise it feels like they're having the same fight over and over again about, does he need to increase his security? Will he allow the cops to protect him? And it's just like, it gets a little annoying. But so it got a little annoying in this one. But I really liked the crime, and her dealing with basically an investigation of cops. And so that was fun. The element with Rourke was interesting. We got to see a little bit more of like his ties back to the crime world and to his childhood in Ireland, and so that was very nice. So I enjoyed this series a lot, and so I've been really working on catching up to the series so I can be like catching up with reading the books in real time as they're released in the next few years. Okay, the next book that I finished was King of Mist by Jordan Rivet. This is the part 2 of what turns out is like actually a full-blown series. I didn't realize, I thought it was a trilogy. I don't know why. There's more books in this series. So this was number 2. The first book left us at a cliffhanger where, maybe I shouldn't say for people that haven't read it. So anyway, so it's the second book, a fantasy series. It's new adult fantasy series. When we start off, our heroine, I think, is in just out of her teen, Dara Ruminor, and she comes from a family of fire workers, so that they can basically like use fire and manipulate it, and she does not have the ability to do it when the series begins. And so she has taken up like fighting, jousting, and her parents don't approve, but she's doing it anyway. And at the end of the first book, we left off with a cliffhanger. The second book picks up right where it left off, and in her trying to manage a new job, and basically being largely alienated from her family. We're following up on like, all right, leads on what's going on in this world. What are the different conspiracies going on, and then also the relationship between Dara and the prince of this world. I don't want to reveal too much. It's hard to talk about a second book in a series without doing too many spoilers. I did not enjoy reading the first half of this book, and it had nothing to do with the story. It had nothing to do with the author's writing. It had to do with my mood. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, and I have found that when I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, reading fantasy books is not always the best for me. It's easier for me to read kind of lighter, fluffier books, because which fantasy tends to not be it for me. So I just had a hard time with it. The second half of the book, though, the pace picks up. And in here, we start getting some answers, and things start happening. And that kind of broke through my anxiety and allowed me to enjoy this second novel. So I'm not gonna pick up the third one right away. Maybe at some point this year, but I'm not in like, you know, I don't need to finish this series, and I'm so sorry to this book and to the series because I think my anxiety really kind of is largely responsible for that feeling. But I think it is a book that a lot of people would enjoy, a series that a lot of people would enjoy. All right, from then on, the last book that I read in December was Betrayal and Death. So book, what are we at? 12 in the In Death series. And this one followed the murder of women. A series of women are murdered, and they are raped and then murdered, and it, you know, it was interesting. The murders here, or the whodunit, was not the most interesting element here, but it was interesting enough that it does keep you reading. It doesn't take away from the story. What was probably more interesting for me in this book was the developing story between Eve Dallas's assistant Peabody and like electronics detective McNabb. And this is where finally, like, their story had been a little bit annoying to me, and this is where I'm like, okay, I'm on board now. I'm on board with this story, with this relationship, and I like to see where it goes. So I really enjoyed that element of it. Now, major trigger warning then for sexual assault, obviously, in this story. It is a big part of it. So if that's not something you're okay with, then you'll want to steer clear of this one. But the In Death series is just, it's becoming my go-to. And so I read a couple of these in December, and I'm currently like just finished one, and I already jumped into the next one. So it's a series that I am kind of binging at the moment. Unintentionally, I didn't mean to do it, but because they are such like comfort food for me, that's just like what's happening right at the beginning of 2019. So that's actually pretty exciting because it makes me feel like if I continue this pace for a little while, I might catch up. It might not take me years to catch up to the In Death series because I'm really, really enjoying it a lot. It's got this futuristic element because it's set in the future, but still very grounded in like the elements we recognize in like a police procedural, while having really interesting characters. So I'm enjoying it. I think I've had a really great reading month in December, and I'm going into January with like a huge TBR, but a lot of excitement and a lot of energy being put towards reading. So yeah, how's your reading month going? Let me know down below. I really like when I get a chance to interact with everybody in the comments and here and in other videos. So feel free to chat with me down below. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.